In homicide investigations, things aren't always as they seem. That's what I learnt when I investigated the murder of Jane Thurgood-Dove, a suburban mother, gunned down in front of her 3 children. She seemed to have no enemies, nothing to hide. That's when I had to use my ABC of homicide. Assume nothing, believe nothing, and check everything.
Found the body of a man on the front seat which was badly burnt.
We don't know whether he's been shot, we don't know whether he's been stabbed.
Horrific act, and any death is tragic. A total of 9 shots were fired.
The best detectives Victoria's ever seen.
I don't intend to stop till someone's brought to justice.
Failure is not an option. It was a beautiful morning. It was actually Oaks Day, which was Ladies' Day during the Cup Carnival in Melbourne. 6th of November 1997. And I got into the office at about 2 o'clock, and I think a lot of people had taken the day off because of Oaks Day, so it was fairly relaxed in the office. And I didn't have a tie on, and I thought, oh, what a fantastic day. And then the phone rang at my desk, and it was about 10 to 4. And the message was, you've got a job. There's been a drive-by shooting in Muriel Street, Niddry. A lady's been shot. She was shot in front of her 3 children. So we get the crew together and I start to drive out to Niddry. Initially, I'm thinking, well, I wonder how this has happened. Is this just some young people driving along the street, randomly selected a house and shot someone? I arrived there and the scene was quite frantic. There were some uniformed police moving around. There were some detectives moving around. And in my mind, I'm thinking, I've got to take charge here. I have to concentrate on what I'm doing. I can see a blue Toyota Land Cruiser in the driveway. I can't see anything else. I can't see what's in front of the vehicle. I walked up the drive, and in front of the car I saw the body of a female person. I believe that to be Jane Thurgood-Dove. I knew she was a mother of 3. The house, to me, represented a family, a loving family home. The driveway represented a tragedy, the death of a beautiful woman. I've actually got to pull back a little bit. I've got a lot of things to do at this crime scene. We know that the first 12 hours or so is critical. This homicide is only an hour old, so it's about now going through a process, trying not to become, I guess, emotionally involved, even though it's a tragic death, but it's now about, let's see what we can find at this scene to see if we can actually solve this crime. Beside where she was shot, on the wall of the house, is black gunshot powder. I can also see on her hand a large amount of black powder. This is as if she's put her hand up trying to protect herself. The detective says to me, What we've established is the deceased, Jane Thurgood-Dove, drove in the driveway of her home at about 3:40 p.m. There were 3 children in the car. So I say to the detective, "Where are the children now?" He says, "Sitting up in the back of the milk bar." I walk up to the milk bar. Now, in the back of my head, I think to myself, 98% of homicides are committed by someone known to the victim. Probably 56%, there's some direct family member. And I think Jane's probably separated from her husband. This will be the husband or something like that. I walk up to the milk bar. There's Scott, 10 and a half, sitting there with his little sisters, Ashley and Holly. And I say to Scott, "I just got to ask you a couple of things. Where's your dad?" I expect him to say, "Oh, Dad doesn't live with us." He said, "Oh no, Dad went to work this morning." I find out that Mark was actually at work. Then I ask Scott, "What did you see?" He said his mum drove home back into the driveway as she normally did in the afternoon. He says, "I'm sitting in the passenger seat." His mum gets out. She's seen a man with a balaclava and a handgun. The next thing, he's watching his mother run around the car. He's gone around once, coming around twice. All of a sudden, he said, "I saw my mum fall. I saw a gun." And I hear the gunman runs back, jumps in the car, and the car takes off. Scott will never get over that. That impression will be there forever.
Ten to 6, the bell rang, and I went to the door, and there's 2 men there. And they said, "We've got some bad news. Your daughter's been shot and killed." And that's like being poleaxed.
Hi, Dad.
Jane was very loyal.
She was quite happy to be someone's wife and mother. She met Mark when they were both still at school, and he used to walk her home here. It was just like they were meant for each other. I always used to say to John, they're the perfect family. And that's, I think, what's so difficult to handle what happened. Because they were.
And the one thing that haunts me still does today, is how Jane was in that position where she dropped to her knees, and that arsehole
he stood over her and shot her.
and he shot her in cold blood. Bloody dreadful.
It's 4 o'clock on an afternoon. The lady's gone out not expecting anything like this to happen.
This case generated an enormous amount of media. You need the media and you need the public support to actually give you the information, but then you don't want to run your investigation in the media.
certainly a feeling of shock and disbelief in Niddry tonight after what can only be described as an execution-style killing.
All of us in the media that were sort of in the scrum talking about this couldn't quite come to terms with this and why it had happened and how it had happened in front of the kids. Mother of three, shot in front of her children, chased around the car in the driveway at 4 o'clock in the afternoon next door to a primary school. Make sense of that. That doesn't make sense. It was a game changer for this city. We saw these three kids that were just ashen-faced. And I'll never forget the look on the young boy's face as he was being put into a car. Here's a kid who's seen his mother shot in cold blood and then thought, God, are they going to get me next?
The description that was given to us by at least 2 or 3 witnesses, which were consistent, was that the driver of the car had shoulder-length hair, slightly greying, but he had a very narrow face. The gunman was around 5'10", solid build, but the thing that was prominent was he had a beer gut. Then I get a phone call. We've located the vehicle which was used in the shooting. I think that's going to be really good because I'll probably get DNA off the steering wheel, I'll get some things, this will be great. I go around to where the car is located and it's burnt out. It's been a very, very intense fire. We record the registration number, check the records, and it's stolen. I went back to the homicide squad offices about 1 o'clock in the morning. There's 3 things that you need in a homicide to start your investigation. Identity of the deceased. I know she's Jane Thurgood-Dove. Cause of death. I know she's been shot in the back of the head. But what is the motive? Well, I don't have a motive right now. And if we're not going somewhere within the first 48 hours of this investigation, I think I'm here for the long haul. Something's not right here. And this goes back to ABC, I think. Assume nothing, believe nothing, check everything. I need to talk to Mark and establish the relationship and what was going on. That is a key issue. I go around to Mark's house. Mark was very upset. So I talked to Mark and he says, we've been in a great relationship. And he says, I always ring Jane every day. It's about 1 o'clock when I have lunch. But yesterday, the day that she was shot, I didn't ring her. We'd had an argument the night before. It was about a personal issue, and I decided I'm just going to let her stew on it. Now, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, well, did he know that she was going to be killed? Is that the reason that he didn't ring? Mark is definitely at work at the time, but could Mark have actually set this up? In my career, this is one of the biggest investigations that I've worked on. You could just about walk down any street in Melbourne and say to someone, what can you tell me about the murder of Jane Thurgood-Dove? And people remember it. It generated massive amounts of publicity. Doesn't matter what walk of life you come from, whether it be the criminal element or whatever, to take a mother in front of her children crosses that line.
Ron was under a huge amount of pressure to deliver something, not only from the family, but there was an expectation from the community and the media that there were going to be some answers and some delivery of comfort.
I believe that there is something within Jane's background which holds the key to this investigation.
We know that 98% of homicides are committed by someone known to the victim.
I just need these people to be caught.
Mark wasn't a good performer in the media.
So occupies a lot of mind and life.
I had people telling me, Ron, he's involved because of the way in which he looks. He never looks comfortable, he doesn't speak properly. We asked Mark about financials. He says, well, you won't believe it, I'm still paid cash every Thursday and that's a cash bonus. Now, we look at it and think, well, yes, he could take money out and actually save up sufficient money to actually pay somebody to kill his wife. Mark has been through the ringer, a mammoth amount of publicity, thrown him in the spotlight. But now, I suspect that maybe he's involved with arranging his wife's death. But then we were getting lots of leads, lots of information. I was starting at 4 o'clock in the morning, trying to keep up with enormous amount of leads. Back in 1997, we didn't have a sophisticated computer system. They were very slow. By 6 o'clock, when the rest of the team come in, we basically had the day set. We would all split up and go out on our inquiries. And quite often it was 10 o'clock at night when we got back to the office. We would sit down and say, we've achieved this, we've eliminated these people, or we've followed that lead up, and then it would start again.
He was pushing the crew. He wouldn't go home. He'd say, come on, let's do another hour. And then he'd turn around and it's like 17 hours had been clocked up, and it put a strain on all of them. And I just said, enough's enough. The case is still there. It won't go away, but you need to come home and have a break.
Over the journey, I've learnt many things, and one of them, I guess, is my key to investigation, that is ABC. Assume nothing, believe nothing, and check everything. What does that mean? Assume nothing is, don't go there with a preconceived idea. Believe nothing. Just don't accept it straight off the bat. Check everything. Sometimes someone will tell you something. When you go away and check it, it may not be 100% accurate. My ABC of homicide. Assume nothing, believe nothing, check everything. But I had to delve deeper into Jane Thurgood-Dove's life. Maybe we might find a clue. Jane might have had a secret. We searched the house, and in her handbag, we found a card of a police officer. What does that mean? We go and see the police officer, and he says, yes, I know Jane. She's been the cleaner of my house for 2 years. And from that, we formed a relationship, a sexual relationship. Mark doesn't know anything about it, and I would hope that you're not going to tell him. I said, when's the last time that you spoke to her? He said, it's only about a week ago. I was on night shift and Jane rang me. And I said to Jane, look, you've woken me up. I don't want to talk now. He said, the call went for about a minute, no longer. I said, I'll catch up with you, and I went back to sleep. On the surface, nothing wrong with that. So then what we do is assume nothing, believe nothing, check everything. We checked Jane's house, but we also checked phone records. Hang on a minute. There's the phone number of the police officer. That phone call went for an hour and 15 minutes. He's saying he spoke to her for a minute. So now I have a situation where I have a police officer who I think has told me a deliberate lie. I look at his physical description. His physical description is nearly identical to the gunman. Why would he want to kill Jane? Where is that police officer on that day? We did a little bit of work and established he was on a day off. It was a long investigation, so it's about digging deep. Maybe Jane has said something to the immediate family which might be significant. So I talked to Susan, Jane's sister, and she gives me some more information. She says, I go in to see Jane. It's only about a week before she was shot. Jane's distressed. I say to her, Jane, what's wrong? Jane says, I can't tell you. She says, well, you can tell me, I'm your sister. Is it something about the children? No, I don't want to tell you. But what's wrong? She said, I have a secret. But she never shared the secret with her sister. Sometimes as an investigator, you might speculate to accumulate. Is the secret around the fact that she'd had a relationship with the police officer? Is it possible that Jane was thinking about leaving Mark? What was the conversation that went for an hour and a quarter? I then go around to search his house. I remember going into the lounge room. On the mantelpiece was a large photograph of Jane Thurgood-Dove and candles. And I thought, this is like a shrine. This is in remembrance of her. There's something's just not gelling here. This is odd. I find his computer. I want to look at his computer and I can't get on. He said, I've got a password. I say, what's the password? He says, it's Jane's date of birth. Then I find a document. He's changed his will. He wants to be buried beside her at the Fawkner Cemetery. This police officer is no doubt infatuated with her. When we searched the policeman's garage, we found a black balaclava and we also found traces of black gunshot powder. When we saw those two things, all of a sudden is, well, hang on a minute, here's a balaclava that's similar, here's some gunshot residue, can't tell you that it's similar, but it's black. So now I have a situation where the police officer, he says, I didn't do it, but he can't account properly for where he was on the day of the murder. And I'm struggling to actually eliminate him. I get another phone call from him and he says, I want to meet you. So I go and meet him at a restaurant in Kingsway, not far from the police complex. I arrived before he got there. It's about 11 o'clock in the morning. I was somewhat concerned because I was aware that he'd joined a pistol club. He'd gone and got himself a .357 Magnum handgun. And I say to some detectives, and we had them strategically placed around the restaurant, was a bit like the newspaper up and looking out through a hole. But I said, we've got to be careful here. We've got to actually take some precautions because I was worried. I said, if he comes in with a backpack, we just got to be careful. He walks in with a backpack. Then he says to me, I'm going to the toilet. And he went to the toilet with his backpack. I thought, he's going to come out with a gun. Jane Thurgood-Dove was having a secret relationship with a police officer. There's no doubt the police officer was infatuated with her. We're 2 years into the investigation. He's become my prime suspect. He's rung me. He says, Ron, I want to come and see you. So he meets me at a restaurant in Kingsway, not far from the police complex. He walks in with a backpack. Then he says to me, I'm going to the toilet. And he went to the toilet with his backpack. I thought, he's going to come out with a gun. But he came out and he sat down and he said to me, well, he says, Ron, what you've got to understand is I'm equally like Mark. I consider myself married to Jane. See, people talk about poor Mark in the media. What about me? And I said, I can't eliminate you. I'm saying, mate, if you've got nothing to do with this, you ought to be telling me that you've got nothing to do with it. He says, if you think you got enough, you charge me. He gets up and he walks away. I'm struggling to actually eliminate him. When you're investigating homicides, it's not necessarily about accumulating suspects. You might start an investigation with 20 persons of interest. It's about going through a process where you eliminate them one by one. And at the end of the process, you might only be left with one or two. They then become your prime suspects. We door-knocked over 2,000 houses. Then it's about looking back at that information.
Good afternoon, sorry to disturb you. From the homicide squad.
I went back to my golden rule, ABC. Assume nothing, believe nothing, check everything.
You didn't hear anything at all? What I want to do is to leave this here with a face image of what we believe is the gunman and the description of the car which was used on the day.
What did we find from that? I find a man in Muriel Street who said, look, I didn't want to come forward. But on the 2nd of November, around 11:30 at night, I saw the Commodore, which was used in the murder, parked outside my house. I couldn't see the driver, but I could see the passenger. He's got whispery hair, it's pushed over, and he's smoking a cigarette. It was parked in a position which they were looking towards 5 Muriel Street. Then I find somebody else who said, on the morning of the murder, I saw that car parked directly opposite 5 Muriel Street. There was 2 men in it. It's clear Jane was under surveillance. The question was, why would someone follow Jane Thurgood-Dove? She wasn't involved in drugs. She wasn't involved in crime. Is there something in her life that would warrant it? So I get a phone call from a well-known criminal of Melbourne. I'd had some association with him. His name is Des Moran, or commonly known as Tuppence. He was notorious in the drug world here in Melbourne. Tuppence said, Ron, if it's about a burglary, I ain't coming to you. If it's about receiving stolen property, don't expect me to come. But if it's around a homicide and the murder of an innocent lady, I'm happy to come to you and give you information. Tuppence says Mark Thurgood-Dove paid to have his wife killed. I said, are you sure? He says, that's what I'm told by another criminal. But he says, I can tell you what, I have got a favourite coffee shop here in Ascot Vale. Whilst I'm in the coffee shop, a man comes in, he's got a pot belly, and I see another criminal there who hands him a handgun. And there's a payment of $2,000. The payment is just for the loan of the gun. The man goes off and he's riding a push bike. Three days after the murder of Jane Thurgood-Dove, he comes back and he hands the gun back to this person. And the bloke says, mate, I don't want that gun, it's dirty, because you killed Jane Thurgood-Dove. I said, well, who's this man who had the gun? He says, I don't know. But he says, Mark Thurgood-Dove has paid to have this done. So now I have information from Tuppence Moran which says Mark paid to have his wife killed. I know that he didn't ring her on the day of the murder. But I can't eliminate the police officer either. So I come up with an idea which we hadn't used before, which was a polygraph. They're used predominantly in America and it's a great investigative tool. I think sometimes it's about eliminating the innocent.
I believe Ron was way ahead of his time. He's very innovative. He was open to looking at different investigative methodologies used worldwide. Polygraph is designed to look at changes in heart rate, blood pressure, blood volume, changes in emotional sweating and changes in respiratory cycles. If a person consciously decides that they're going to lie to a question, they become fearful of being caught in that lie. So it's not the lie that induces the change. It's actually the fear of being caught in that lie. And the polygraph captures that at that particular moment.
Mark undertakes the polygraph and he passes. The police officer undertakes the polygraph. and Steve Van Apperen, the operator, comes out to me and says he's failed. He said, on the basis of that, I'm confident to say that he is the person responsible. And I go, wow. Two and a half years on into the investigation, the murder of Jane Thurgood-Dove remained unsolved. I had two prime suspects, Mark, her husband, the police officer, her lover. I asked them both to undertake a polygraph test. Mark passed, the police officer failed. So I'm able to say to him, Mark, I'm satisfied that you're not involved in your wife's death. For me, that's some satisfaction, but for him, I know it's a massive relief because he can stand up, hold his head high and say, I am not responsible. So I've got a situation now where police officers failed and they say that more than likely he is the person responsible. Why would he want to actually take Jane's life? I can write on a whiteboard a list of reasons why the police officer is a good suspect, and then I write some other things. It doesn't make sense. If you're going to do it as a police, why not do it on your own? Why involve someone else? Assume nothing, believe nothing, check everything. When we searched the policeman's garage, we found a black balaclava and we also found traces of black gunshot powder. They were analysed and the black gunshot powder is of a different grain than what was used in Jane's death. The balaclava turned out to be a balaclava which was used in the Army Reserve. So sometimes you look at something and you think, great, that supports what I'm looking at, but when you actually test it, it's not, and there is another alternative for the balaclava. I can't go into the details of the methodology because it is very sensitive, other than to say that was a technique that we used. In the end, I was able to say to the police officer, I'm satisfied that you're not involved. But why in the world, from day one, didn't you cooperate? He says, I wanted to honour Jane's name. I never wanted anyone in the community to know that I'd had an affair with her. So I thought by just saying nothing, eventually it would all go away. It cost me years of investigative time. But we shook hands and we walked away. After years of investigation, 2 prime suspects eliminated, we're back to square one. For me personally, it's devastating. I haven't provided the answers to the family, but it's about reinvigorating the team and going again, because failure is not an option.
They had nothing, the coppers. They had nowhere to go. You know, I admire Ron. He was here all the time, backwards and forwards.
And she became my mum.
I thought, what would it take to draw the information? $1 million, it'd probably do it. And I thought, I'm going to ring John Sylvester about this.
It was John McGill who came to me, and in desperation he said, I want the government to put up $1 million to help find the killer of my daughter.
We need to have answers of who and why.
Christine Nixon was the Chief Commissioner of Police at the time. She gets up and she says, we're announcing $1 million award today.
We think $1 million may well say, well, I could start a new life and be prepared to come forward with the information required.
Within an hour, I get a phone call. Is that you, Ron Iddles? Yes. He said, I've got the information. He said, I can tell you who killed Jane. He said, look, I won't be greedy, Ron. I'll tell you this up front. I only want $100,000. And I said, here's the deal. I'll meet you. I'll pay you $10,000. If I go away and verify the information, I'll pay you $40,000. He says, I'll ring you back. He rings me back again. And he says, all right, deal. You accept that the job is dangerous. You're dealing with, at times, hardened criminals. You take all the precautions to sort of protect yourself. But I think it's about how you actually treat them. They're still human beings. So you're not going there heavy-handed, you're actually just having a conversation. And I think that works best and they respect it rather than you come in trying to stand over them. We make arrangements to meet at Eastern Beach in Geelong at 10 o'clock on a particular morning, and I have to be alone. And I start thinking of all these things. Who is he? Is this a setup? Maybe I'm going to be kidnapped and held to ransom. But I make sure that I've got a firearm with me, and we had a lot of other security arrangements made just in case it went pear-shaped. I'm sitting at Eastern Beach in the car, and he agreed that he would ring me before he got there. I get the phone call and I think, oh, well, he'll be 10, 15 minutes. I make a phone call to security to say, I've just had a message, he's on his way. Just keep monitoring things. I put the phone down. He's at the passenger's door already. He gets into the front seat. He lights up a cigarette. I said, well, you better give me a smoke. Because at that stage, I'm shitting myself. That's a technical term for being very nervous. I have a smoke with him. And he says, I've got to tell you, this is a case of mistaken identity. They've shot the wrong woman. I'll tell you who the killer is, but he's dead. His name's Stephen Morty. He says there is a man who lives in Muriel Street who also has a wife. The wife is not dissimilar to Jane. This was meant for them. The house was a weatherboard house. It had a driveway on the right-hand side. They drove similar cars. They both drove a four-wheel drive.
The reason was pretty simple, in that her husband was connected to the underworld and that there had been a previous attempt on his life. The criminals had put Jane under surveillance. They'd followed her, they'd seen her movements because they'd clearly been told, kill the mum, 3 from the corner, the blonde one, with the kids in the four-wheel drive. Well, there were 2 of them, weren't there? There was the one who was the real target, and there was Jane.
I then went and met a prisoner in Barwon prison. I call him an old-style crook. He's about 60. And he tells me a similar story. He says this is a case of mistaken identity. So I'm reasonably satisfied that what the person told me at Eastern Beach is right. Stephen Morty is the gunman. I then went away and researched it and was confident that there's 2 others involved. One's Jamie Reynolds. He's part of an outlaw motorcycle group. Jamie Reynolds is involved with stealing the car, and the driver of the car is also part of an outlaw motorcycle group. I do a lot of work and I identify where Jamie Reynolds was. And I'm told you can't have any resources because they're all being used with the Piranha Task Force, which is the investigation that looked into the underworld killings in Melbourne. When I do get the resources some 7 months later, you won't believe it, he's died in a boating accident. Jamie Reynolds, the man who is responsible for stealing the cars, has been killed in a boating accident. Stephen Morty's dead. I now only have the driver left. We did significant amount of work around who the driver is, and as I sit here today, we still have not identified the driver.
I want Jane to rest in peace. In later years, to find out it was a mistake, that's even worse. Because the people who put the contracts out are worse than the people who commit the crime. They really are. Because they hide behind a subterfuge.
Yes, I finished there 2014.
The facilitator is still out there.
Oh, correct. Yeah.
And I won't have it that nobody knows him.
I think after doing homicides for 25 years, there's never a case where somebody involved hasn't gone and told somebody. You just got to find that person.
For homicide investigators such as Ron, they understand that they are virtually the voice for the victim who can no longer speak. So they take it terribly, terribly seriously.
If I had a family member that was murdered, you'd want people like Ron on the case because you know he'll never give up.
This was an exhaustive investigation over 13 years. What I'm confident of is that the person who took Jane Thurgood-Dove's life is in fact Stephen Morty. But I've got to be honest, I cannot say who organised or arranged this murder. But I know that there is somebody in the community who holds the key to solve this. That will write the final chapter of the murder of Jane Thurgood-Dove. This was a case involving drugs, firearms and multiple murders. He'd been committed to stand trial. I was shocked. Sandy McRae has escaped. I considered him to be a psychopath. He might have been thinking, I'll go and find Ron Iddles and I will dispose of them.
We had just had our second child.
I was worried about my wife and the children. Where is he going? What is he doing? There's only two people I've been scared of in my whole career, and he was one.
New Ron Iddles, the good cop, next Sunday on 7 and 7 Plus.